Ethan Walker sat in the cold, sterile doctor's office, his fingers gripping the armrest of his chair. The air felt thick, suffocating, as Dr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Ethan, I'm afraid the tests confirm an advanced stage of cancer. It's aggressive and we need to discuss your options." The words rang in Ethan's ears, his vision blurring as if the world had just tilted on its axis. Denial was his first reaction. This couldn't be happening. He was only 38, with a promising career as a journalist, a loving wife, Claire, and their 10-year-old son, Lucas. He had deadlines to meet, stories to uncover. He didn't have time for this. But as he looked at Claire, her eyes welling with tears, the reality set in. He was running out of time. Days passed in a haze of fear and resentment. He pushed Claire away, snapping at her attempts to comfort him. Lucas sensed something was wrong, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to explain. Instead, he locked himself in his study, staring at old photographs, images of family vacations, Lucas's first steps, and Claire's radiant smile on their wedding day. He had spent so much time chasing success. Had he truly lived? One evening, Claire entered the study, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, I know you're scared, but we still have time. Let's make it count." Her words lingered in the air. Could he shift his perspective? Could he learn to live, even while facing death? A restless night led to a fateful morning at the park, where an elderly woman sat feeding pigeons. She noticed his distant stare and asked, "What's on your mind, dear?" "I just found out I'm dying," he admitted, surprising himself. She nodded knowingly. "Then don't waste a single moment." Ethan sat beside the woman on the park bench, watching the pigeons peck at the scattered crumbs. "How do you just accept it?" he asked. She smiled, her wrinkled hands folding neatly in her lap. "I had cancer 2 years ago, thought it was the end. But then I realized something. Death is inevitable for all of us. The difference is how we choose to live before it comes." Her words struck a chord. Ethan had been so consumed by his diagnosis that he had forgotten life was still happening around him. He watched a young couple laughing nearby, a father pushing his daughter on a swing, the crisp morning air filling his lungs. He was still here. He still had time. Returning home, he found Claire in the kitchen, sipping coffee. "I want to try," he said, his voice hesitant but determined. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "Try what?" "Living." That night, he took out a notebook and wrote at the top, "Things that matter." He didn't want to chase empty accomplishments anymore. He wanted to fill his days with meaning. The first item on the list: teach Lucas to ride a bike. The next morning, Ethan woke with a renewed sense of purpose. He looked at the notebook on his nightstand and ran his fingers over the words he had written the night before. He had spent years chasing deadlines and accolades, but now he would chase moments, real, meaningful ones. Over breakfast, he shared his list with Claire. "I don't want extravagant things. I just want to make memories with you and Lucas," he said. Claire smiled, squeezing his hand. "Then let's do it together." The first task on his list was simple yet profound: teach Lucas to ride a bike. That afternoon, he took his son to the park, carrying the small blue bicycle they had bought years ago but never truly used. Lucas wobbled at first, frustration setting in. "I can't do it, Dad," he muttered, looking down at his feet. Ethan knelt beside him. "You can, and I'll be right here until you do." After multiple attempts, Lucas finally found his balance, pedaling on his own. Ethan's heart swelled with pride as he watched his son ride down the pathway, his laughter filling the air. At that moment, Ethan felt more alive than he had in years. That night, he crossed the first item off his list. There was still so much to do, and for the first time since his diagnosis, he felt excited for what was to come. Ethan's condition deteriorated faster than expected. Simple tasks became exhausting, and pain became his constant companion. Yet he refused to let it overshadow the time he had left. He spent his days with Claire and Lucas, cherishing every smile, every hug, every word spoken between them. Knowing he wouldn't be there for Lucas's future milestones, he wrote letters for him. One for his graduation, another for his wedding day, and several for moments yet to come. One evening, as he lay in bed, Claire by his side, he whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." She squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Ethan." With a weak smile, he replied, "And I love you, always." That night, Ethan Walker closed his eyes for the last time, leaving behind a legacy of love, courage, and a lesson the world would never forget.